for the EMDAC monthly Lunch and Learn. This month we are going to be discussing the FEMA's Resilience Analysis Planning Tool, otherwise known as RAPT, which is an amazing tool that is free for the public, that allows you to look at data from various different GIS mapping points to use for a variety of different reasons. And I'm not going to spoil the presentation by talking too much about it. I'm going to let FEMA's Benjamin Rance, who is the mastermind behind the FEMA RAP tool, present to you today. There'll be a PowerPoint, and then there'll be an interactive demonstration after the PowerPoint. So let's welcome Benjamin, and I'm really excited about this.
Hello, Molly. Thank you. Can you hear me all right?
We sure can.
All right. That's awesome. I tried to say hi and turn my video on, but it said the host hasn't allowed it. But I assure you, nobody's missing out on anything by not seeing me on the camera. So I'll just keep it off during the presentation. My name is Benjamin Rance. I'm the project lead for the Resilience Analysis and Planning tool. I have been lucky enough to work with the state of Louisiana on a number of kind of recovery and preparedness initiatives, specifically working with Sandra Gunner and the Data Task Force. So always happy to support the state of Louisiana and kind of collaborate with everybody who's working down there. So as Molly mentioned, I will be kind of sharing my screen. I'll be going through some slides on the Resilience Analysis and Planning tool today. And then we kind of want to jump into a live demonstration of the tool. I encourage anybody who has any questions, please feel free to, put them in the Q&A or put them in the chat, however the hosts want to handle it. And I'll kind of pause and check in every about 10 minutes or so to see if we have any questions. If there's nothing else before I get started, I'll share my screen and we can start the presentation. All right. Can everybody see my screen as of right now?
Yes, sir. And you're able to turn your camera on if you would like.
Okay, gotcha. I'll do it at the end to make sure I say hi to everybody. Thank you. So what is the Resilience Analysis and Planning tool? There are a lot of tools out there, and I think sometimes it can be kind of confusing to kind of figure out, which tool to use in which situation and what are the benefits or advantages to one tool over another. So the first thing I want to say is, this was developed by the FEMA Technical Assistance Branch to really kind of support local emergency managers, community leaders, organizations and agencies who work in the emergency management community preparedness space to really just help them understand or better understand their communities, right? It's basically complementary. And for those of you who might be new to RAPT, just wanted to provide kind of a quick example of what it is. So the first thing I want to say is that the RAPT is absolutely free. You don't have to log in. It doesn't cost any money. We like to say it's like having a GIS analyst in your pocket. And really, we bring a bunch of different data layers together that are all publicly available in one easy-to-use space. So we have over 100 different preloaded GIS layers, and those are a combination of 3 different data sets. We have community demographic information, we have hazards information, and we have infrastructure information. And you can really visualize that data on the map, or you can see it in pop-ups, and we're going to show how to do that. Combining those layers with some pretty powerful analysis tools and the ability to add your own data really make RAPT kind of beneficial and very useful for those of us like myself who are not GIS experts and who don't necessarily know how to use GIS extensively. Another thing we have included in RAPT is FEMA's Community Resilience Challenges Index. So this is an index of potential challenges to resilience that's based on a literature review of different published peer-reviewed methodologies on community resilience and social vulnerability. So before we kind of get into the tool, I want to take a step back and just kind of emphasize how important the demographic data is in RAPT, and then kind of relate it to something you might have seen before. So I'm sure people are pretty familiar with the CDC's Social Vulnerability Index. A lot of people have seen it before. So the SVI provides a couple scores for you. It gives you an overall vulnerability score, and then it also gives you a score for each of their sub-indices. So you can kind of see how your community compares to other communities. The next step that we take is not only do we provide you, with a CRCI value or percentile for each county and census tract, but we also provide you with all of the 22 indicators that comprise that value. So we take the next step, and we're not just saying, your community is in the 50th percentile and the community next to you is in the 60th percentile. We're saying your community is in the 50th percentile, and these are the indicators and the factors and the value for those indicators that lead you to being into that percentile. So I tend to lean on the CRCI when I'm looking at community resilience because it provides a more in-depth look at community resilience. It's also based on a literature review of all of the available methodologies on community resilience and social vulnerability, not just one single methodology. So not telling people to stop using the SVI, because that's obviously what has been used throughout COVID. But I definitely see that there are benefits and advantages to using the CRCI to take a look at social vulnerability or more likely, challenges to community resilience. So we talk about the 22 indicators, and so what are they? So they're all listed here, and most of these indicator layers come from the U.S. Census Bureau's American Community Survey, the ACS, and all of the data you'll see in RAPT today for demographics are 5-year averages, and we have almost all of these layers available at the county, census tract, and tribal levels. So, we want to make sure that we include our tribal territories as well. So we're really glad and proud to have those included. So again, all of these layers are publicly available. We're pulling them from the ACS, which is the authoritative data source. And because of that, we have the most recent data available as well. As soon as ACS releases their data layers, we pull them and we take about 2 or 3 months updating RAPT. So we always have the most current and recently released information. In addition to our indicators, we have infrastructure layers. These are pulled from the Homeland Infrastructure Foundation level data set. And these are pulled as REST services. So they're pulled directly from Highfield, and they're updated automatically when Highfield updates their layers. So you can see some of the important and critical layers in there that typically we talk about, things like hospitals, nursing homes, pharmacies, public schools, mobile home parks, and stuff like that. And in addition to the indicators and the infrastructure layers, we actually have information on different hazards, weather, and risk. So we have historic information on things like tornadoes and hurricanes. We have risk information, which includes the National Risk Index, expected annual loss. We have the FEMA flood hazard zones. We have seismic risk information. And we also have real-time weather information from the National Weather Service. And these are actually my favorite layers. These include severe weather watches and warnings. We have, current hurricanes and tropical cyclones. We have excessive rainfall outlooks. And we even have current real-time radar that you can take a look at where severe weather is happening. So really, you can visualize all of this information in 3 different ways. So once you toggle on a layer, you'll see it reflected on the map. So the picture kind of in the center of the screen is we've toggled on a census tract layer, percentage of households without a vehicle, and each census tract turns a color that corresponds to the legend. So for households without a vehicle, anything that is dark blue has over 51.04% of the households without a vehicle. In addition to visualizing information on the map, you can actually see a pop-up as well. And you can see on the bottom of the screen, for instance, at the county level, we give you the population the value for the indicator we're looking at, and then also for certain indicators, kind of a breakdown. So not only do we tell you it's, about 21% of the population age 65 and over, we also give you a breakdown of each 5-year increments, how many individuals are estimated to be in there. So between 65 to 69, 70 to 74, and so on. And then you can also see on the right, you can see that we have our information in tabular form as well. We have an attribute table. So everything you see visually on the map and in the pop-ups, you can actually see in tabular form. And then you can actually take information from there and export it to an Excel document. So then you can, you can sort and filter however you'd like once it's in Excel. So in addition to the data sets that I mentioned, we also have some pretty powerful analysis tools that help you examine different population and infrastructure. So as I mentioned before, you can add your own data layers. You can search for them in ArcGIS. You can add them as REST services, with their URLs, or you can even add your own local files like shape files or CSV files. The filter tool basically allows you to select a hazard or an infrastructure, and you can filter by a specific set of parameters. So let's say I want all of the level 2 trauma hospitals in the state of Louisiana. I can easily set filters for that, and then my map will only show me hospitals that fall within those parameters. The population counter and the incident analysis tool also allow us to set an incident area and provide details of either infrastructure or population demographics within that area. So I'm going to walk through that really quickly. So let's see how we add data. So let's say we wanted to look at nuclear power plants, right? So we've added that data, and I go, okay, look for nuclear power plants, add that layer. You can see it reflected on the map. Once I click on it, I have a pop-up with all of the information for that specific entity. And one of the options it gives me is to set it as a location. I set it as the location of my incident analysis tool, and I say, give me a 50-mile radius. Within 3 or 4 clicks of the mouse, I now have a visual and a list of where that specific nuclear power plant is. It shows me a 50-mile radius you can see on the right, and all of those blue dots within it are all hospitals that are within 50 miles of that nuclear power plant. So once I have this, I can actually take that list of hospitals and export it, and I can, if I wanted to calculate the total number of beds in all the hospitals, I could easily do that. Using the same example, the same entity, but we want to understand the population surrounding it. I'll use the same nuclear power plant, draw a 10-mile radius, and I'll say, okay, give me the total number of individuals within that 10-mile radius, and then also give me an estimate for the number of individuals with the disability. So you can see the total number of individuals is around 245,000, and then the number of individuals with the disability is around 21,800. So again, pretty easy to come up with an estimate for the number of individuals within a certain distance from an entity. And then on the right, you can see the list of all of the demographic characteristics that we could try to get an estimate for using this tool. So really the value of RAPT is it lets you combine multiple data sets and examine multiple layers using analysis tools at the same time. So I want to kind of take a look at what that, what that entails. How can RAPT help me? It can really help you see what threats and hazards can affect your community. And like we said, we have historical information. You can see like historical tornadoes in the picture in the upper left. And then we have all of that purple area is the FEMA flood hazard zones. And we've toggled on some infrastructure like nursing homes and public schools. So you can see which specific infrastructure entities are within the flood hazard zone. And what about the people impacted? What are the impacts of those threats and hazards on our community? For instance, we can take, the whole area from the flood zone, run our population counter tool, and we can see that there's approximately 15,000 individuals with a disability within that flood hazard zone. Just a couple other specific examples, let's say we have, current weather watches and warnings. We can take an excessive heat warning, isolate that area, and then look at the population demographics underneath it. So we can see where there are concentrations of either individuals age 65 and older or percentage of households without a vehicle. if this is an area with rolling blackouts or maybe, with power outages, we can actually take a look at where those are and see where pockets within that area might have individuals that fall within these same demographics as well. Let's say we're looking at hurricane evacuation. We can use our incident analysis tool to draw a projected storm path. And again, it shows us not only all of the hospitals in the area, but also the hospitals within the impact zone. And then underneath it, we have census tracts with households with limited English. So we can prioritize hospitals for evacuation. We can, send individuals to hospitals that are outside the impact zone. We can do planning and operations support to help evacuate people with limited English. How are we going to interact with our target audience? We could also take this list and, like I said, calculate the total number of hospital beds if we wanted to. And then here's one for severe weather. This is a real-time severe weather watch. It's a flood warning. You can look at the critical infrastructure within that flood warning area, such as power plants or public schools. And I also looked at the CRCI percentile to, say, hey, let's determine census tracts with greater challenges to resiliency. I used the population count tool to give me a total estimate for the population within the incident area. And then I can get an estimate for at-risk populations, age 65 and over, or disability, or households without a vehicle. So I can do all of that with just a couple of clicks. So really, how can RAPT be used when working on preparedness considerations? Like we talked about, identifying real-time severe weather and hazard layers, identifying specific communities impacted by risks. We're talking about, equity and helping disadvantaged communities. Our CRCI is a great way to take that index and take those percentiles to identify communities that might have greater challenges to resilience. And then specifically looking at demographics within an area, whether that's a county or a city or what it might look like, we can take a look not only just where the pockets of those individuals are, but get estimates for the total number of individuals with those characteristics. And then also, just kind of taking a look at capability gaps. What are the number of hospital beds total? If we had to evacuate all of these hospitals, do we have enough resources? Do we have enough manpower to be able to do something like that? So just different ways that RAPT can be used for different preparedness considerations. And then one of the things that we as of last week, just finished is there's a grant equity threshold tool. So it's called the GET. And it basically allows you to quickly calculate the percentage of the population within a selected area that live in different types of designated census tracts. This is the Climate and Economic Justice Screening Tool, or the CJEST disadvantaged communities, the Community Disaster Resilience Zones, or CDERS, which was just released last month, or the CRCI BINs. This is really helpful for grant applicants who want to show that maybe their impact or project area for a grant will have, over 60 or 70% of the community in a CJEST disadvantaged zone, or in, a CRCI bin that's, in the top 10th percentile, which means it has the most challenges to community resilience. We then allow you to download this as a shape file or a GeoJSON file, a number of different files you could download and actually attach with your grant application. We're very excited to become a more formalized part of, for like BRIC grants, that process. And we're going to be releasing more information and having webinars about that in the future. But this was just, made live last week. So we're really excited to kind of highlight it. And obviously, we want people to understand how to use the tool and how to get their questions answered, even if, we're not available for a presentation. So we have a RAPT Resource Center. I can share that with the team, or I think the host can share that with everybody as well. We have overview information, background information. We have all of our data sources that are listed, and we link to all of them so you know exactly where we're getting our information from. We have a full set of frequently asked questions and, a 40-page user guide, which walks step by step on how to use the tool. We have instructional videos, and then we also have a way to contact us. So just wanted to let everybody know that that's available, and we'll definitely highlight that as well. In addition to, RAPT, FEMA has a number of publicly available resources on their Geospatial Resource Center. We have hazard pages for different types of specific disasters. They have climate resilience resources, and they have data on major incidents and disasters going back to 2020. So just wanted to kind of make a small plug for that. A lot of great resources on the FEMA Geospatial Resource Center. So I'll put my contact information in the chat. I did want to check in with Molly to see if we wanted to take a break now or if we wanted to get into the demo a little bit. So Molly, I'll turn it over to you, and I'm happy to move forward however you want.
We could take a break now so we don't interrupt the demonstration.
Okay, I'll turn it over to you then.
All right, we're going to take a 10-minute break at this point to give Sylvie's hands a break, and then we'll be back at 12:31.
And kind of that additional context. So I always like to show that one. We also have, if we zoom out a little bit, in addition to our indicator layers, I mentioned we have infrastructure and hazards. So if we click on our infrastructure tab, we can say, okay, show me hospitals in this area. I'd also like to see, maybe some nursing homes. You can take a look at those. And then while we're looking at these, if we click on one, you can see we have a pop-up. And there are a couple things it tells us. It gives us the name of the hospital, the location, the type, so general acute care, the trauma level. So for this one, it says not available. So Highfield must not have this information, but for a lot of them, it will tell us the trauma level and the number of beds in the hospital, what its status is. And we have a link to the website for more information. So I could easily go through and kind of take a general look at what types of hospitals and how many beds and everything there are within this area. Again, we can do the same thing for nursing homes. If we click on the purple dots, it gives us all of the information that's available for this. Sometimes you'll see like -999 or not available. That's because the information in the Highfield data set is not complete. In addition to some of our infrastructure and indicators, we also have hazards. So, if we're taking a look at Lafayette and we wanted to take a look at the flood hazard zones, we could toggle those on, see where those flood hazard zones are. And then one of the things we can do is, go back to our infrastructure layer and say, okay, now we have our flood hazard zones. We know where they are. And now let's see if any of our critical infrastructure is within that. Do we have any nursing homes within these flood hazard zones? It looks like there are 2 right here. We could click on those and see what the information is for those, how many beds they have, and at least how to reach out to them if we were trying to do some planning for that. We can take a look, do we have any hospitals within the flood hazard zones as well? So we can kind of see where our critical infrastructure overlaps with some of the hazards that we might have. In addition to the flood hazard zones, we have historical information. So let's take hurricane tracks, right? If we toggle one of these on, we can see that there are a number of historical hurricane tracks that are running through this area. But let's just click on this one right here. There's a section right here from, looks like Gustav, which was in 2008. And it looks like this section right here, what we can kind of see is from Gustav. So let's say we wanted to take a look at any of the critical infrastructure in this area. What we can do is we can say, okay, let me set that as a location. And now we have this line right here that we pulled from a hurricane layer. And I say within a 10-mile radius right here of Gustav, which is right here that we just used, show me all of the hospitals that are within that area. And we can see all of the hospitals that are within a 10-mile radius of this segment of the hurricane. If I wanted to look at things like nursing homes or public schools, I could do that as well. And then this list we have down here, not only does it give us the same information that's in the pop-up, we can click on this little cloud and it will download all of this information to a CSV file. So let's say we did that for hospitals. I can see it looks like there's about 13 hospitals within here. I can download all of this to a CSV file. And let's say I want to open it. When I open that in Excel, it tells me the name of the entity the address, and we have all of the same information that we have in the pop-up. This population is the same as the number of beds. So if I wanted to, you know, I would take out this one that's closed, but I could take all of this and say, all right, what's the total number of beds of all of the open hospitals that if we were to have a hurricane that passed through the same area, you know, what would that look like? So just really easy within a couple clicks, you know, you can go from, you know, infrastructure to hazards to, you know, some of our analysis tools. Another thing we have, we'll just zoom out to look at a little bit more of the state. I mentioned we have severe weather watches and warnings, so we can toggle those on to see if we have any in the state. It doesn't look like we have any right now, which is always a good thing. Always good to not have those. And then if we look at, you know, any of our real-time radar, we can see if there's any rain or any weather in the area. And right now it doesn't look to be. So here's a quick look at the indicators we have here, our infrastructure, and here are our hazards as well. I'm going to show a couple of our tools, and then I want to leave some time at the end for any questions that people might have. So let's say we're looking at Lafayette, and I want to learn a little bit more about the population in Lafayette. I can go to our population counter, and let's say I'm looking at, you know, West Lafayette. You know, you can basically select an area you want to look at, and I say, okay, this is where I want to look, and I want you to tell me the total population. Let's say this is my incident area, or let's say that's my impact zone if I wanted to submit a grant application. We can run this tool. It selects all of the whole and partial census tracts within this area, and it will give us an estimate for the total number of individuals within here. So it looks like 113,000. And then also within this area, I can say, okay, I have 113,000. Now, out of that 113,000, how many individuals lack access to a vehicle? It'll calculate the total number of households, and then it will give an average of, you know, a certain number of individuals per household to come up with an estimate of the total number of individuals that lack access to a vehicle. So you can kind of see that right here, and you can see how easy it is to use the tool and kind of take a look at it on the map. I mentioned earlier another tool that we have, which is the filter tool. So I'm just going to zoom out and show how to use that really quickly, and then I'll kind of open it up for questions. The filter tool is really nice because we toggle on our infrastructure, and let's say, you know, we are looking at hospitals. Okay, so you can see when we toggle it on, we have the hospital layers for across the whole country. Let's say I just want one specific parish or one specific area in the state. I can basically set this filter. So there are a couple of them that are already preloaded. So I can go state is Louisiana. Here we go. And let's say I can filter by city. So let's say we were looking at Lafayette. I can say, let's see, Lafayette. And I toggle this on, and now it will only show me the hospitals that are within that area. Well, let's say I wanted to get a list of those, right? So again, we can interact with them. We click on them. We can see what they look like. Let's say I wanted the list of this. If I go back to our infrastructure layer, I can say, hey, view this in the attribute table. Like instead of looking at it, you know, on the map, I want to see it in this attribute table down here. And you can see we have 18 features. Looks like there are 18 here, and you can see what they're listed here just in the city of Lafayette. And then what we can do is we can options export this to CSV. If I hit OK, it would give me a similar CSV or an Excel file like you saw earlier, and I would have all of this information in an Excel file where then I could sort it or filter it or do whatever I wanted to. And again, if I toggle this filter off, it shows me all of the hospital entities because I don't have the filter toggled on. So I hope this was beneficial. I do want to turn it over to Molly. I see we have about 10 minutes or so left. I don't know if anybody has any questions or if there are any specific aspects or functionality or areas within the tool that you want me to take a look at. So I will stop sharing and turn it over to you, Molly.
Sure. So we do have a couple of questions in the chat. The first one is, during the recent wildfire events in Louisiana, we noticed that the hospital and nursing home information being used in the tool was outdated. Can FEMA work with HHS and or states to ensure that information is updated?
That is a great question. So we aren't the authoritative source for the data layers in the tool. We're pulling them from the authoritative sources. So what I would recommend is if you know, or if you notice that that's outdated, and let's say you're from the parish and you know that there's a new hospital that just opened that isn't listed, on the RAPT Resource Center, when you look at our data sources tab, if you scroll down, we actually have a section that says something doesn't look right. So what we've done is worked with ACS, Highfield, and the National Weather Service. So if you send that information to this this email address right here at Highfield, they will actually update it on their end. Like I said, these are all pulled as REST services. So if you click on, for instance, this hospital layer, we open it up in a new tab, you can see the specific layer that we're pulling from. And as soon as Highfield updates it on their end, it will be updated in RAPT. So if you see something like that, we definitely recommend you to reach out to Highfield, you know, kind of let them know. You can see this is the layer that we're pulling from. Reach out to this email address in Highfield, let them know. And from what we've seen, they've been very good at responding and updating and correcting that information.
All right. And the next question is, this is a great tool for disaster recovery efforts. I'd like to know if any data or indicators were collected on military veterans populations, such as location, percentages, average age, etc.
That is a great question. So we, I guess, in our default layers, when we're looking at our indicators, we don't have any specific information on veterans. However, I would say that if somebody came to me with this question, the first thing I would do is go to the add data and I would take a look at it, right? So I would say, like you can type in Veterans Health Administrations, you can see veteran status variables. The ACS has a lot of data layers, and unfortunately, just because we only cram so much information and so many data layers into the tool, we're not able to include all of the ACS layers. But what we can do is, I just typed in veteran, and we can see a number of layers that we could add. So right here, it looks like veteran status variables, and if we click on it, it will show us, let's see, this census tract. It shows us actually an estimated number of veterans that live here, and it says approximately what % of the adults are veterans. So this was something that I didn't really know of. I really had no clue that this existed, but as we zoom in, each one of these dots, I would imagine, corresponds to a census tract. So when you click on one of these dots, you're going to get this census tract, the number of veterans that live there, and what percentage of that, that is of the total adults estimated in the area. So this was something I, just in this moment, just kind of found. I'm happy to take a look. This one looks like it shows our census tract boundaries. We click on that and it gives us the same information, but now instead of a dot, we can actually see the boundary in the census tract. So lots of great information. If we don't have it in RAPT, more than likely you're able to find it using the add data tool. And it's, obviously free, pulling from the ACS, publicly available data. So this was pretty easy to find here.
And I highly recommend the add data tool. I have played around with it myself. I have basically any publicly available GIS data is you are able to put on your map using the add data. And I have looked at, just for fun, like Waffle House and Taco Bell locations, and there are map layers that you can add for that. I've searched different types of disabilities. I've looked for like statistics on where we might have high population of autism. So I can think about, shelter locations that might benefit from having sensory items. There's so much information, and the possibilities for that adding data is absolutely endless.
And I'll just chime in, Molly. I think that's a really great point. I'm really glad you brought that up. Like, I've just typed in veteran and we're able to find some really great information. We do have a somewhat curated list. If you're in the Add Data tool, it shows ArcGIS Online, which is what you search by default. You can actually take a look at the RAPT suggested layers. And we have a number of these layers that were actually recommended to us by emergency managers that we would love to include, but we just don't have the space in the tool. So you have all of these. And one of my favorite ones is if you scroll down the community layer. So if you add the community layer, you know, we talk a lot about counties and census tracts. Well, a lot of times we're dealing with townships and villages and cities. So what this does is you can see it adds all of the communities. So if I wanted to take a look just over here, let's say at, I think this is Opelousas. I'm probably pronouncing that wrong, so don't hate me. But this is just the city right here. And now we have just the city outline. And so now from here, we can actually use this as our population count. So now instead of having to draw the shape to try to get the exact city, we already have the population count. And I can say, okay, within the city, how many individuals have a disability? So it takes this community layer we just added, selects all of the partial census tracts that comprise this city, and will give us an estimate for the number of individuals right here. So you can see, you know, the RAPT is all about using data layers and functionality of the tool together with other aspects of the tool. Add data, look at the communities layer, click on this community, use it with one of our population counter tools. Okay, well, now that we have that, let's also take a look at, you know, some of our community resilience indicators. So let's take a look at, you know, age 65 and older, or we can take a look at population with a disability at the census tract level, you know. So we can take a look at a lot of this stuff, and it's all about having multiple layers toggled on at the same time and using functionality within RAPT together. So,
All right.
any other questions?
We have one last question before we close out for the day. How does the adding a file work in the Add Data feature?
That is a great question. So if we go to the Add Data, so search for layers, pull in REST services. So for instance, like this hospital there we had earlier, I could pull this in to the RAPT as a REST service. And then the file. So basically you can drag and drop, or you can browse and add files that are any of these file types. So we can have shape files or CSV files. We can have GeoJSONs, zip files. You just have to have it saved on your computer or on your desktop, however you want. And then you can drop it in here. And as soon as you drop it in, it will reflect on the map the same way it did when we searched for, you know, these data layers and hit add. It just have to be one of these file types.
All right, and that was all of the questions. So I will turn it back to Bambi to close the meeting out.
I'm talking without and being on mute. I was saying thank you so much, Benjamin. We appreciate the information. Thank you, Molly, for bringing him in and to share this information. We do not have our November Lunch and Learn scheduled yet, but we will be getting that scheduled very soon, and we'll be sending that information out to everyone. And again, in the chat, there is the link for any questions that you might have, lingering questions. And please go out and use that RAPT, play with it, move around in it, and become an expert so we can all lean on one another. So thank you all. Have a good rest of your week.